So let's talk about shifting perspectives. And y'all, this was just so big. So I'm just going to apologize now because this might be kind of all over the place. I hope not, but it was just well, y'all have been listening to me long enough. It was just one of those things that came up, and it was the Godwink, and it was just like, Laurel, I'm telling you to listen to this. So I started. I was doing my walk on Sunday, and I listened to Hidden Brain, which I love. You know, y'all know I stalk NPR. Good morning, Mama. I stalk NPR. And so Hidden Brain is this really cool show that is a lot about, it's about the brain, but it's really about behavior, right? And how we behave and why we behave and how it manifests and how it shows up and all that kind of stuff. And so as I was walking this weekend, there's this show, the episode is called Both Can Be True. And now there's a trigger warning here because the story, so he brings on guests to talk about situations and uses those situations to give examples of the thing that he's talking about. So again, it's called Both Can Be True on Hidden Brain on NPR. And it is, I'm giving you a trigger warning because the story that he used, the guests, it talks about suicide, right? And an attempted suicide that wasn't successful, by the way, but an attempted suicide. So it could be triggering for people. So I just want to put that out there. So anyway, he's talking about this whole idea of both can be true. And that's the first thing that caught me because for me, there's a reason I named my radio show and my podcast, The Rutledge Perspective, because it's my perspective. That's number one. It's my perspective. But I'm clear enough and I understand enough to know that, you know, we all have different perspectives, and my perspective is mine. And it's based on my truth and my experience. And I work really hard to also include actual data, real facts, study, learning. I when I hear something that lets me know that maybe it's something different than I thought, I always bring that up and we expand. That's what perspective is about. The second reason I named it perspective is because I truly believe if you can change your perspective or shift your perspective or broaden your perspective, you can change your circumstances. How you see things, right, impacts how you see things. And this whole idea of both can be true spoke to me because for me, I am that person that can see both sides of things. I can find a different perspective. That's what I'm able to connect dots and just give a perspective on things that most people can't do. And not because I'm some crazy genius and I am, you know, a soothsayer and all that kind of stuff. There's just, that's my gift, just to be able to see those things. And so I really believe that as we look at this hidden brain and look at both can be true, that there is some power in our perspective. There is power in your perspective on things. You guys have heard me say this a lot. Words matter. Actions matter. Perspective matters, right? How you show up matters. It all matters. And how we see things and react to things matters. It has impact, and there's power in that. And so one of the things he said kind of mid-show was a lot of times those people who can see both sides, it's seen as indecisive. And that whole idea of seeing things and seeing both sides of something is called integrative complexity. So that's the other thing that grabbed me, right? Learning this new words, it just tapped into my whole nerd thing. Learning these new concepts, it's a social psychology concept, integrative complexity. And the example he gave was, and I'm sure we've all seen it, Rubens' picture where if you look at it, some people see the vase and other people see the two faces looking at each other, the two profiles. And he used that as an example. And most people see one or the other. Some people can see both, and very, very few people can see both at the same time, right? And integrative complexity, that whole both can be true, is saying, no, both things can exist. Good and bad can exist in the same situation with the same person, etc. It can all exist. And in going through this whole process with this person who happened to be someone who had an addiction, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about it, but I really encourage you to listen to this episode because you'll probably grab something that I didn't even get out of it. This person who was an alcoholic ended up going to AA, had a sponsor, at some point attempted or was getting ready to attempt suicide. The sponsor happened to reach out to them, save their life, right? The person didn't end up committing suicide. She and the sponsor got really, really close. And when she was committed, the sponsor took care of her stuff. And then later on in her life, she committed herself again for an extended period of time to really turn the corner. And again, this person kind of took all care of everything for her. And long story short, it turns out that the person ended up stealing her identity and all of these kind of things, right? And so the struggle she had was this: how can both things be true? This is a person that lifted her up. This was a person that treated her better than anyone else. This is a person who was kind to her, that supported her, that took care of all of the things when she couldn't. That was true. And this was the person that stole her identity, that took all of her money, that damaged her credit, that harmed her. That also was true. And how can both exist? And the whole idea was that we have a hard time. One, we have a hard time living in gray. We have a really hard time living in gray. Lawyers is that whole thing about living in gray, right? Which is really interesting to me because I've worked with a lot of attorneys. And I love when I find an attorney who can operate in gray, because people are gray. People are not black and white. And yet you have those attorneys that are very black and white. And it depends on what you want, but they can be gray in the courtroom. I mean, it's just very fascinating to me. Anyway, so the whole idea was, but how, as she looked at this person and thought about this person, which is it? Which is it? And she said something that was so insightful. She said, the harm didn't eliminate the good, but the good didn't excuse the harm. Right? The good didn't negate the harm, or the harm didn't negate the good, but the good didn't excuse the harm. In other words, look, I am going to be so grateful. I am going to be so appreciative. I am going to thank you and lift you up and tell people all the great things you did for me, because those are true. And I'm going to call you out on how you hurt me, because that's true too. And both of those things can exist. Both of those things can exist. And what it shifted for me was this thing that I had been, not shifted, but what it brought to the forefront for me that I'm really hoping will help you guys who are trying to make some really tough decisions and are in maybe really toxic situations, is this connection to words matter and our perspective. Because one of the things I started working on very early on with my therapist is but and. Right? So if you say, man, she really hurt me, but she was so good. Man, she was really good, but she hurt me, right? When you use that but, that conjunction but, it kind of negates all the stuff that you said before the but. I really like this designer, but man, her stuff really is not suited for my body type. Or, man, that was really good, but I really wish they had done blah, 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 right? No matter what your tone, if you're using a but, you're kind of saying all that stuff I said before, I may not really be bought into it. But there's a difference if you use and. And there's a difference if you use and, right? I really love this designer. Her stuff is so cool. And I really wish that she had a more inclusive line in terms of sizes, because I think she could be attainable by so many more people. I love her stuff. That's true. And I wish she was more inclusive. That's true. Both statements are stronger. Both statements are your perspective, and neither one minimizes or negates the other. Where I think that becomes most powerful is in two places. It's with the words and the statements you're using with yourself. And it's the words and statements you're using in your organizations, especially those of you who are in toxic environments. When we're using those words with ourselves, right? Man, I really, Yeah, I know I've lost a lot of weight, but man, I've got so much more to go. I really tried hard to get that stuff done, but I'm just not, I'm just not ready. But I know this thing is really, really important to me, but it's just not the right time. But is it really not the right time, or do you just not want it right now? And only you can answer that question. Because the but kind of says the other thing really isn't necessarily true. Now, there are times in the conjunction but is really important, right? That's not the context in which I'm speaking. Depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, that but can take everything before it and make it inconsequential, ineffective, unimportant. And that may not be what you mean. That may not be what you mean. And if you change that, right? I've worked really hard and I've lost a lot of weight, but man, I've got so much more to go. How about I've worked really hard and I've lost a lot of weight, and my body just needed a moment to reset, and now it's time for me to get to the next level. Those things are true. I am acknowledging and honoring the achievement that I've made. That person brought my name up in every room. That person was there for me when I really needed it. That person made me feel like I was the only person in the world. And sometimes that person has been the one that just crushed my feelings where I didn't think I could get out of bed. And that's not okay. Both things are true. That person was absolutely there. Your ride or die. And that ride or die may have come with a price in that relationship. The price being, you're going to ride or die, but I may have to put up with some attitude, and I may have to put up with some nasty, and I may have to put up with being put upon and downgraded and talked down to and all that kind of stuff. And I have a choice, right? Because if I acknowledge that both are true, and that the good doesn't negate the bad, but the good also doesn't excuse the bad, right? That the bad doesn't, negate the good, but the good doesn't excuse the bad. It is easier for me to see both things as true and then take action. In other words, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, if you're talking about a person, right, a relationship, it may be that it's time to extricate yourself from that environment. That could be true. To save your sanity, right? To save yourself if you're in a dangerous situation. That could be true. That could be the action that you need to take. And by giving yourself the opportunity to look at things from a different perspective, that both things can be true, that all things can have a bit of truth to them, that everything isn't black and white, you give yourself an opportunity to actually make a definitive decision around what action you're going to take. So let's put that in the context of professional relationships and organizations. You are in your department, you've got a boss who promoted you, who put you in rooms that you never thought you would have been able to be in, that gave you opportunities that you didn't ask for, that put you in projects, that did all kinds of things that gave you an ability to learn and grow and develop and move. You love that. You love that. And this is also the boss that gave you that review that said, I know you're in that meeting, but you just don't talk enough, or you talk too much. Or after you've been working on something for a long time, based on your conversations, comes back and says, that is so not what I told you to do. Right? Those little digs that start to make you think, those microaggression pieces that start to make you think that you're crazy, or that you misinterpreted, or that you're incapable. having you in a meeting where you're giving a presentation that you guys had agreed upon, and the minute someone says something negative, well, you know what? That's not what we thought. That's not what we wanted. Good morning, Angela. Thank you. That's not what we wanted, right? In front of everybody. Well, that's just HR. That's those people being soft again. Even though it's something that you guys had agreed upon and decided beforehand. Both can be true. This person has promoted you. They've supported you. They have lifted you up. They've given you opportunity that you can take advantage of. And in those moments, they have actually absolutely crushed your spirit. They have given other people through their actions permission to negate your power or your position. They've done all those other things to undermine. Both things can be true. And what are you going to do about it? Because often what happens is when we look at those two things and our brain is saying it's black or white, which one is true, we often pick the one that's getting us away from the pain, right? That's that sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze. It's in pain. I got to get away from this. I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be hurt. I got to just move, right? This person is a bad person. Now, there is a percentage of people, they are just narcissistic jerks. They are just as evil as they can be. They just have no desire to do anything for anybody else. There are people like that. They are the fringes. Then there are people who are actually good people, but they have been trained or taught or groomed in a culture to be very egotistical, to not be forthright, to be pushy, to be a bully, to do all those kind of things. They have been brought up to do those things, to behave in such a way that is harmful and hurtful, aggressive, microaggressive, all that kind of stuff, right? So they're not fundamentally bad people. They've just been taught to act that way. And so if we are experiencing that, and both can be true, it helps us to keep from picking which one we want to go with. Either picking the one that, well, but they've really given me all these opportunities and nobody else will have done that. And the rose-colored glasses, where we continue to be hurt and undermined, and we may be surprised by some negative review, or our money is impacted, or we don't get promoted, or worse, we get demoted or fired, or because we were walking around with rose-colored glasses. They never do that to me. I see what they're doing to those other people, but there was something else there. They're not going to act that way with me. They would never do that. Or we pick the other side. Man, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I say. I just always got to have my guard up because they are going to find a way to hurt me. They're going to find a way to embarrass me. They're going to find a way to make this my fault, right? We go into heavy duty CYA mode. I mean, you're not going to catch us flat-footed. And we spend more time in CYA than really, really building the effort that we need to do the thing that we're trying to do, right? To build that reputation through our execution, so that the perspective of this individual is inconsequential, because other people have their own experiences with us. So no matter what the person says, their experiences are the ones that lead them, not his or her opinion. So we get to that place where we try to pick one or the other, right? Because it's hard. It is hard work to balance those two, to know that both are true, and to operate as if both are true. It's very, very difficult because our emotions get involved and we're in protection mode. But if you can do that, if you can find both are true, you can make a definitive decision as to how you want to respond. You can thank the person for all the opportunities they've given you and call them out on the harm they've caused. Hey, can we have a one-on-one? I really want to talk to you about this meeting we just had. Now, help me understand. That's a really good phrase. I love that phrase. Help me understand. As opposed to, you have got to be kidding me, or other little ugly words you want to say. Help me understand. We had this conversation before. This is the direction we said we were going to go in. We agreed, sent the email, confirmed, and that's what we presented. But then we got in there and you said something different. I'm confused. Help me understand which it is. What did I miss? Right. And sometimes by taking that ownership yourself, you kind of negate that, You. Because when you start out with you and the pointing fingers, people automatically get on the defensive. So it doesn't mean you're not going to call them out on the behavior that's incongruent. It just means you do it in a way where you can be heard, right? Active listening. Communication is about being heard. The other person has to hear what you're saying in order for it to resonate. So what can you do to make sure you're heard? So you understand and acknowledge the support, but you call out the behavior that's harmful. You call out the behavior that's inconsistent. That's why I always harp on HR people. You cannot be in HR if you don't have courage, if you don't have an ability to see broad perspectives, if you don't have an ability to say, here's what we said we wanted and who we said we are, and here's what our behavior has been and what people are now believing, and those two don't match, so what are we going to do about it? If you don't have the courage to call that out, I need you to find something else to do, or to remove yourself at least down to a level where your lack of courage does not impact the overall organization. Because part of this seeing both sides, this knowing that both are true, requires a courage to not only acknowledge and see it and do something about it when it's impacting you personally, but if you are in a position of leadership, remember leadership being about behavior, not position. If you are in a leadership position that requires leadership behavior, you've got to be able to recognize, call out, and support rectification of that disconnect, that incongruent behavior, right? That misalignment of actions and words. And it's the same when you're dealing with how you are being impacted and how you are operating and your own actions and words. And by knowing that both are true, it also gives you an opportunity to manage your perspective in a way that you can make a decision. You can get calm. You know what? This person really has been someone that has given me some really great opportunity. But I consistently see this behavior, not that. And I consistently see this behavior. I consistently see this behavior. And no matter how many times we've had the conversation, and you need to be honest with yourself about having the conversation and how you had the conversation, right? No matter how many times we have the conversation, no matter how many times I hear oh, that's not what I meant, that wasn't my intent. By the way, those of you guys who use that is not an apology. A real apology is change behavior. Because if you keep saying, that's not what I intended, but you keep doing it, you know what you're doing. So, and we see you, right? We see you. Stop it. I know this person is, on the one hand, really supportive. And I also know that this behavior is really detrimental. So now I can decide what I want to do with that. Maya Angelou said, people will reveal themselves to you early, but leave them the first time. You've seen it. Believe it. Now make a decision as to what you're going to do with it. Are you now getting what you need, right? Yes, they gave you opportunity. Yes, they put you in positions. Yes, they promoted you, or whatever the thing is. And you took all of those opportunities and did what with them? What skills did you gain? What exposure did you gain? What else now is yours to own that's in your toolbox? Because yes, someone may have given you the opportunity, but you still had to perform. You still had to execute. What have you now gained that no one can take from you that you can now use to catapult yourself to something else, either there or somewhere else? Or what reputation have you now built that you can stand on to force a behavior change or not? And where is your care? Do you really care to make the effort to change the behavior because you really believe in what you're doing and where you are and doing it where you are? Or is just doing the thing wherever it is the more important? Because you can find somewhere else to do the thing. As I was told a long time ago, and I believe you were looking for a job when you found that one. You can find another job. It may take a minute. There may be something in transition, but we all have choices, guys. We all have choices. And if you're in an environment where both are true, you're being supported and promoted, but you're also being denigrated, right? You're being put upon, you're suffering at the hands of bullies. If both are true, you have a choice. Choices have consequences, right? So you need to make a plan. That's why my whole academy is that this action, empowered action. Get aligned, right? Get grounded, know what it is, know who you are, because it all starts with you. So when you're seeing this disconnect, where are you in that? Because we got to own our own stuff. We've got to own our own stuff. If something doesn't go well, the first place you should start is, where did I participate in this thing not going the way I wanted it to? Now, women in particular don't own everything, because we have a tendency to ask that question and then decide it was all our fault. Okay, that's not necessarily true either. Okay. But it is important to start with you. Who are you, and where did you participate in whatever this thing is, right? Get really clear on who you are. And then understanding where you are, what's the culture, what's the environment? Am I getting to do the stuff I really want to do? Am I being fulfilled? Am I making an impact? Where are you, right? Where are you, and what do you want? Those two things, right? Where are you? So I know who I am now. Where am I, and what do I want? And then when I have answers to that, then I can decide what I'm going to do. But we try to move quickly from, here's what happened to me, here's what I'm going to do about it, without having the evaluation. Now, if you're in danger, you need to move. If you are in danger, you need to move and just figure it out later. But there's a long trajectory between I'm uncomfortable and I'm in danger. There's a whole lot of road between those two things. And we have a tendency, when we're unhappy, to move all the way to I'm in danger when we're just uncomfortable. So we need to take the time to really understand which one it is, so that we can take an action that makes sense. And that's about broadening your perspective. Both can be true. I'm telling you guys, this hidden brain thing was powerful. Both can be true. That person that you hired can be an exceptional practitioner and an incredibly incompetent leader. That person that you hired can be a phenomenal leader who can get people excited and moving, and also does not execute anything ever. Both things can be true. That person that's your ride or die, you can pick up the phone and you can call them, and they will drop everything to be there. And they can be that person that never lets you forget that they dropped everything to be there. All those things can exist. But I can change my perspective to say, this is who I am. This is what I want. And instead of seeing this as an either or, I can see this as a but and. Yep, this is true. But I know that what I want to do is important, and this enables me to do it, right? The but and. The both are true. I can shift my perspective to say, it's not about that person. It's about me and what I want. I can shift my perspective to say, you know what? I've been sitting in these meetings with executives, and every time I'm in one of these dang meetings, there's some kind of argument, or somebody completely changes their mind. They rewrite history every single dang time, and we have to start over. And I am the kind of person that once we make a decision and we move, I'm moving, because I got too much other stuff to do to be redoing stuff. As my dad said, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, what makes you think you're going to have time to do it over? I can't believe we have to keep doing stuff over, and we keep having to revisit decisions. That's why we can't get anything done, because we keep revisiting the same crap. And I can sit in that, or I can change my perspective to say, you know what? The environment in which I am existing and working and attempting to make an impact is an environment where they're going to continuously rewrite history. So instead of just being angry and irritated and having to completely redo stuff, because see, now I know better. When we know better, we do better. How about I understand this is normally what they do, so I'm going to get some things really solid and really in writing. We're going to start doing some, hey, here's what we said. And by the way, We are moving forward with this. So speak now or forever hold your peace. Because see, then I never have to say, I told you so. Never. We've had the conversation. So now if all of a sudden 3 months later, you're like, oh, but that's not what, oh, no. We talked about this. I let you guys know we were moving. We are moving. Now, if we've gotten after acquired information that says we need to adjust, then absolutely, that's what planning is about. You plan for adjustment and flexibility. Both are true. We are moving. We got a direction. We got action. We are moving. And we are going to leave room to be flexible and adaptable because life changes and goals change and perspectives change. And it enables us to be able to respond to those in a way that is necessary depending on what it is and what the impact is. Both are true. But I've now changed my perspective to say, you know what? Instead of me getting mad at them doing what I expect them to do, because they've shown me who they are, let me revamp the way I think and the way I process. I can still be me. I can still get stuff done. I can still be clear because it's not unkind to be clear. I can still move, but my clarity changes. My clarity is more about, here's what we said. I'm going to repeat this to you and make sure we are clear before we move. So if it's going to take me longer to get clear with you, that means our deadline is pushed. So just so we're all on the same page, right? I bring the person in to have some shared accountability for the thing. Because I've been given the opportunity to make the difference and to do the thing. I've been given some level, right, of acknowledgement of expertise. And I say some level because, you never know. And I also know that because I'm in an organization that if they haven't seen it before, they assume it's not possible or can't be done, or they're more concerned about being liked than about getting things done, that there's a high likelihood that something's going to turn it upside down after the fact and all the after meetings that they shouldn't be having in the first place. I know that. So my perspective, instead of being irritated, well, I can still be irritated because I'll probably still be irritated. But instead of that irritation paralyzing me, I take that irritation and change my action, change my engagement. And I bring my folks along with me so that they don't suffer the same frustration, right? That's part of a leader's role, is to block some of the madness, to not have the team see how the sausage is made. They just need to know you're having sausage, right? They don't need to see how the sausage is made. They don't need to see how you got to that decision. They don't need to see all that madness, all the changing of history. They don't need to see all that. They just need to see, hey, here are the kind of things we discussed. Here's what we're deciding to do and why, and where we're going. So let's start putting our plan together, right? And they need support to do that. And then they need early warning signals if something's going to change. Because both can be true. It is going to change. You know who you're dealing with. And you can manage that change by managing how you respond to the thing in the first place, by changing your perspective on efficiency, by changing your perspective on effectiveness. I'm having to do that right now. I have a real thing about efficiency. Just say what you're going to do. If you're asking people to do something a certain way, make sure everything they need is ready. And don't have it be contradictory. Don't have one place saying do it one way and another place saying do it another way. And the people who need it can't get to the information. That is insane. Or you have to read everything out to people because you assume they don't read. And most people don't read in detail. But still, stop. But I have to step back and say, just because I have a different expectation around efficiency doesn't mean that I can, or doesn't mean that I can't manage my own frustration. Because I know what I'm dealing with. Therefore, I have a choice in how I respond. I can just decide, you know what, it's going to be inefficient. And it is going to make me crazy. So I can either decide to keep doing it or I can decide to extricate myself. Right? Or something in between. I can decide to do what I can, and what I can't, you know what, let the chips fall where they may. I just can't care as much anymore. I have to turn off my care about button, or at least turn it down. I have to change my perspective. And some of that is, again, being self-aware and knowing ourselves. Just because it's efficient or effective for you doesn't mean that's everyone else's definition of efficient or effective. Just because it's insane to you doesn't mean it's insane to anybody else. Because again, remember There are people who have grown up in organizations or institutions who have operated that way for decades. They don't know anything different. And by the way, they may not want anything different because, see, they're comfortable. And to change is uncomfortable. To acknowledge that there may be some other way to do something means I have to acknowledge that maybe I don't know everything. Or maybe I'm wrong. Heaven forbid. Clutch our pearls. We did it wrong. That takes maturity. That takes professionalism. That takes a concern about executing the thing for the good of whatever the goal is, as opposed to being more concerned about your own individual reputation, your own individual kudos and accolades, right? Because that stuff will come. Reputations follow you, good and bad. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and what are you losing by not being willing to broaden your perspective, to allow other things to come in? What kind of innovation are you hampering? Because you've never seen it before, so therefore it's not possible. So all of you who find yourself saying, but we've always done it that way, stop. Don't. I need you to eliminate, carve out, exorcise that statement from your vocabulary, because we've always done it that way. That is a killer of innovation. Or to say, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. Okay, well, you may have, but did you try it now? Because that was 10 years ago, and now we're in a different environment. We got different technology. We got different people. We're not necessarily trying to do it the exact same way. So really, I need you to try to eliminate that from your vocabulary too, or at least modify it. You know, we tried that before and it didn't work. Now here's what we tried. So are we looking at something different? How is this different, right? Ask the questions, get the information, probe deeper, as opposed to just assuming that it's not going to work. All those negative Nancy's, all of those false advocates, right, that go out there and say, yeah. And then they go behind, that's not going to work. See, I told you that's not going to work. Stop. Yep. Stop. Because you know what? That's your reputation. You are now the person that's seen as a blocker. You're now the person that's seen as unwilling or unable to change. You're the person that's seen as someone who tries to sabotage anything new because, see, it's uncomfortable for you. You don't want to learn new technology. You don't want to figure out how to do something different. You don't want to actually get more efficient and effective because, see, your value is tied up in all the stuff you know. Your value is tied up in the fact that you have all this institutional knowledge, because when you started, you had to do everything by hand or everything from scratch. You had to add it up all by yourself. And that is fantastic. You built it from the ground up. And that is all true. What is also true is that if you really believed in it and if you really thought it was fantastic, you would want it to be even better. You would want somebody to take that foundation that you built and build something fantastic. And you can say, you know what? They wouldn't have been able to get there if I hadn't done that other stuff. How about that? How about that perspective? How about looking at all of the work you put in as a solid foundation that you built upon which the company can now soar, as opposed to, well, when they move, I am no longer relevant. I am inconsequential. You're only irrelevant if you allow yourself to be irrelevant. Change your perspective. You're only irrelevant if you allow yourself to be irrelevant. Go learn the new technology. Go have the conversation. Go listen to the podcast. Go talk to the young person who is doing stuff at the snap of a finger and you don't even know what the thing is. Go have the conversation. If you still don't agree with it, or you don't like it, or you don't want to do it, fine. Just own that. But how about you get the information before you make the decision? How about you modify your negative Nancy and at least try to be open, try to broaden your perspective. Because again, when you listen actively, when you get other perspectives to butt your own up against, if nothing else, you at least get fodder to improve your own argument against the thing that you don't want to do in the first place. Because you know what somebody else's position is. Because if you're not listening, you're not having conversations, you don't even know where they're coming from, and you might not be prepared for that argument. But if you listen, one, you might learn something, but two, you also may actually have an opportunity to impact the thing. Because if you're not listening to them, there's a likelihood that they're not listening to you, especially if everything that comes out of your mouth is, we've never done it that way, or we always did it this other way, or we tried that and it didn't work. People are going to start writing you off because nobody wants to hear that all the time. So if you start listening, they will start listening, and you might actually be able to make an even bigger impact than you ever thought it, because both can be true. What you did can be phenomenal and can have moved the organization forward, and more efficient, innovative techniques built on that foundation can catapult it. Both can be true. You can be a founder. You can be an elder, right? You can be an innovator. You can be all of those things. All of those things can be true. Both can be true. Gray can be true, right? Very few things are black and white. Very few things are black and white. Because as humans, we operate in gray. We have to. Because there's so many unknowns and there's so many things that are outside of our control. Very little do we actually have direct control over other than our own actions and our own response to things. We have the ability to choose our actions and our responses. We are not free from the consequences of those choices, but we do have the ability to choose. And we can choose to broaden our perspective. We can choose to take that job that we just hate, that organization that just makes us feel awful, that culture that is just toxic. We can make a choice to stay and try to impact it. We can make a choice to call it out, because contrary to this whole cancel, I've been seeing that My Pillow guy talking about, my company has been impacted by the cancel culture. Just stop, right? No, you're suffering the consequences of your choices. That's what that is. There are some places and some activities and some behaviors that absolutely need to be called out and further need to be canceled. They are harmful and detrimental. So don't take this whole cancel culture as an excuse to just be who you are. And well, no. I've talked about that. Sometimes we miss the learning because we eliminate the consequences, right? So you got to be careful when you cancel people, because cancellation can enable people, when it's too quick, can enable people to not suffer the consequences of their actions. People need to understand consequences, right? So if you immediately cancel somebody, they can more easily say, well, that's just cancel culture. They just didn't like what I said, so that's the only reason they did that. No. We're going to take a little bit more time, and we're going to help you understand what happened and why it happened and what your contribution was to that outcome. It's not just about canceling you because we disagree. That may happen, and I'm sure that does happen. That's this percentage. The stuff we want to be canceling is serious. Most stuff we just want to be calling out because we're trying to change behavior, and cancellation doesn't always change behavior. And we need both to be true. We need acknowledgement of the situation. We need all to be true, right? Acknowledgement of the situation, understanding of the impact of the situation, changed behavior, and an elimination of that pain, right? An elimination of those outcomes that are negative because of the failure to operate in integrity or whatever the thing is. All of those things can operate at the same time. They can exist at the same time. But in order for us to be able to really understand that and ignite that action and to activate, be empowered to take action, right? We have to be willing to understand our perspective and shift it if additional information comes that tells us it's time. We have to be willing to have courage to speak up, to speak truth to power. We have to be willing to speak up to ourselves, to be aware of our contribution to whatever situation that we're in, to really get aligned on who we are. You got to know you. You can lie to a lot of folks, but you can't lie to yourself. Not really. You can pretend you don't get it, but you know, deep down, your spirit knows. You can get really clear. You can do the work to get clear on where you are, understanding where you are and what you want. Really, really moving into that. And then you can decide what action you want to take. This, I'm telling you guys, this is a game changer. Managing your perspective is a game changer. There is so much power in your perspective. There's the power to manage your emotions. There's the power to see things differently that can inform your actions. There's a power to make someone feel seen and heard. The power of inclusion is in the power of perspective, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, or whatever the new things they're continuing to add. The diversity piece is easy. You can go hire a bunch of people, right? That look different, think different, act different. You can do that. Even equity is easy. That's usually just about money and opportunity, right? You can fix that. That's processes. The hard part is inclusion, because that gets to people. That gets to interaction. That gets to heart. That gets to behavior. And if you are willing to shift a perspective, you can actually impact inclusion. My experience and my lived experience is very different than yours, but I understand that we all have lived experiences, and I'm not going to negate yours just because I didn't live them. I'm going to try to understand them, because maybe I'll get a different perspective on how people show up. If they are from, different socioeconomic background, if they are from a different ethnicity, if they are a different gender, if they have served in the military, if they have been a single parent, if they have been adopted, whatever the thing is, right? If I can take the time to listen and understand, which can shift my perspective on whatever that thing is, it is much more likely that I will be able to be much more inclusive, because there's a level of compassion that comes through understanding. I can develop a level of appreciation for something, empathy, right? Just because I didn't experience it doesn't mean it's not true. And here's another thing I want you guys to take out of your vocabulary. That's not what it meant. That's not what they meant. You're just being overly sensitive. Stop it. What someone experienced is real. Their perception is real. That's like, we learned that in kindergarten? Your perception is reality. Now, again, you need to really own your stuff, right? If you are really in a place where everything somebody says to you just sends you to the moon, yeah, there's probably some other stuff going on, right? But in most cases, if somebody experiences something and they're telling you, every time I go into a meeting and I start talking, people start talking over me. Or every time I mention something, I am blown off, but the guy next to me, when he says it, it's like the world was just opened up for everybody. Every time I mention something, until I have to prove it, it's just negated. Those things are real. So when somebody gives you examples, don't blow that off as, that's just little. That's not what they meant. You're just being overly sensitive. Really? Because their experience is real, because it's theirs. How about instead, you say, help me understand. Give me context. What was it about that didn't feel right? What could have been done differently? May I give you a different perspective? May I offer something, because there's some other things around this situation that maybe you didn't know, because I'm not necessarily at liberty to share all the details, but I can share this that might give you a different perspective on this. That says it wasn't about you. You can see everything in about you. That shifting perspectives enables us to show up stronger, clearer, better. It enables us to take empowered action. It enables us to get clear. It enables us to shift where needed, because we're open to after acquired information, to changing information, to other stuff that may mean we need to shift. It gives us a chance to be open for that. So as you go into this week, think about and pay attention to when you use but instead of and. And not that but's a bad word. We still have buts. That's okay to use but. But think about when you're using it, and are you really negating what you really meant? Think about how you can shift your perspective to be clearer and cleaner and more powerful. Think about how you can do that to help be more inclusive, to understand someone else's perspective and reputation, and to support their experiences. I would love to know. Send me a note. I'd love to know how it goes for you to be using and instead of but this week. With that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in on Tuesday. I love spending this time with you guys. Next week is Christmas week, Lord. And we're almost done with this year. I can't believe it. Thank you so much for being here with me this morning. Angela, thank you for tuning in. Hey, Mama, thank you for tuning in. Those of you on Facebook that I can't see, thank you for tuning in. And for those of you on Jerry's page, KCOH page, thank you for tuning in. I'm so glad y'all are here. I love having this. I hope this touched you guys today, gave you another perspective.
Got a couple of new places from the app. We
Wonderful.
Got Finland,
Ooh.
Baghdad, Santa Cruz, Philippines, Brazil, Australia, San Antonio, the regular case, Kansas City, Atlanta, Austin, Dayton, Santa Fe, and Denver.
Oh, love it. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. The podcast, the Rutledge Perspective podcast, that'll drop on Wednesday. I talk about this a little bit more on Wednesday. It's short. It's like 20 minutes. I try to keep them short. That'll drop on Wednesday. You can find it on any platform where you get your podcast. And I would appreciate a download and a listen and a share and a like. A 5-star review would be just lovely on whatever platform you're using. So thank you again. Thank you all your new places for tuning in.
Michelle Johnson said, this is good information from my own personal perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for listening and watching. I really love spending this time with you guys. Have a fantastic week. Hang in there. It's not easy, but it's doable. Catch you later. Bye.